Let us start with question 41. The function f of x, which is given by sine of x plus 1 upon sine x in the interval 0 to pi, has a local minima at pi by 6, local maxima at pi by 3, local minima at pi by 2, and local maxima at pi by 4. Now to start with, we will first write down the given function f of x, which is sine x plus 1 upon sine x, and they have restricted the domain of this function. Okay, x belongs to the open interval 0 to pi. Now observe that 1 upon sine x, which is cosec x, is continuous throughout 0 to pi. Okay, because 0 and pi have been excluded, so there is no question of sine being 0 in this interval. So 1 upon sine x is defined everywhere. Now the options tell us that we should apply the first derivative test, okay, because it is about locating the local maxima or local maximum or local minimum. Okay, so the second step would be differentiating f with respect to x. Sine's derivative cos 1 upon sine's derivative will be minus 1 upon sine squared x, that is the derivative of the outer function into cos x, derivative of the inner function, chain rule. And if you are applying the first derivative test, then f dash of x should be equated to 0. Okay, and then what I have done is I have taken cos x common from the first and the second term, and then it is 1 minus 1 upon sine squared x. If you take the LCM, then it will be sine squared x minus 1 upon sine squared x. Now as we pointed out, in this interval sine x is never 0. We can multiply both sides by sine squared x, or essentially we can shift this sine squared x to the other side and keep it there, and so that its effect gets nullified because you are multiplying it by 0. Then you will end up with the equation cos x into sine squared x minus 1 equal to 0, which gives you two trigonometric equations, cos x equal to 0, which implies x is pi by 2. Again, we are not going outside this interval. And the second equation is sine squared x minus 1 equal to 0, which also gives x equal to pi by 2. So in this interval, there is only one value of x, that is pi by 2, for which the derivative is 0. And because f is continuous and differentiable everywhere inside the open interval 0 to pi, okay, we know that, because the only possibility of discontinuity was when sine x was 0 or 1 upon sine x was not defined, but that's not happening anywhere in this interval. And more importantly, x equal to pi by 2 is the only value where the first derivative is 0. We should now not worry about the second derivative, okay, because if you look at the options, pi by 2 appears only once. Okay, nowhere else you see pi by 2. We have pi by 6, pi by 3 and pi by 4. Okay, so we need not investigate this function further and find f double dash of x. Okay, we should not apply the second derivative test to save our time. Our job is done. Local minimum at pi by 2. Okay, now having picked the correct option, that is C, I would like you to take a note of the following observation. All of us know this property of allied angles. Sine of pi by 2 minus theta is sine theta, and sine of pi by 2 plus theta is also sine theta, isn't it? Which means the function f must be, or its graph must be symmetric about the line x equal to pi by 2, because our function consists of only sine terms. it consists of sine x and it also consists of 1 upon sine x, and because sine of pi by 2 plus or minus x is sine x, that is the property of allied angles. Let's say this is the line x equal to pi by 2, okay, the green line or the green vertical line. So if you go alpha units to the right of this, pi by 2 plus alpha, this must be pi by 2 minus alpha, and if f of pi by 2 plus alpha is somewhere here, due to this property, pi by 2 minus alpha should also be here. Okay, which means the graph of this function is symmetric about the vertical line x equal to pi by 2. Okay, and because f is continuous, it must have either f min or f max at pi by 2. Okay, that is the first observation, that the graph of this function is symmetric about pi by 2. And if you observe what happens at the endpoints, which are open endpoints of an open interval, so you need to take right hand limit at 0 and left hand limit at pi. You'll find out that both these limits are infinity, one-sided limits. Okay, it's not very difficult to see this now from the definition of the function sine x and plus 1 upon sine x. Okay, so if the graph of the function is like this, it goes to infinity, or x equal to 0 and x equal to pi are asymptotes, it may have a minimum, it may have a local minimum and global minimum at x equal to pi by 2. Okay, see now if you know the graphs of trigonometric functions a bit, and especially what happens if you add two functions and then plot the graphs together, like sine x plus cos x, in this case sine x plus cosec x, then you can replace this may by must. Okay, now the reason why I have written may have is there might be a graph like this. Okay, so it may, so here it has local maximum, but we know that if you add sine and cosec, then you don't get anything in the green color. What you get is the yellow colored graph, which means it has local and global minimum. Okay, so if you know these rules of curve tracing, how to find the symmetry of a curve, if at all there exists any, then you can at least get some important or critical information regarding the problem. Okay, so let's now verify our result graphically. So this is the graph of our function sine x plus 1 upon sine x. Let's restrict its domain to 0 and pi. And as I was telling you, this is the graph of sine x plus cosec x. Okay, and it has the y-axis and the line x equal to pi as its vertical asymptotes, and it has local and global minimum at the point pi by 2, whose value is 2. Okay, so the behavior of the function sine of x plus 1 upon sine x in the interval 0 to pi is very much similar to the behavior of the function x plus 1 upon x. Okay, well, not exactly same, but similar. Okay, so if I restrict the domain of this to 0 to infinity, then you can notice that this function also has its minimum at 1. Okay, like sine x plus 1 upon sine x. Okay, its minimum is pi by 2 comma 2 this point, and the minimum of our function x plus 1 upon x is at 1 comma 2. So this particular question was based on the applications of derivatives, the first derivative test and the simplification. Next is 42. Let P be a polynomial with real coefficients such that integral 0 to 1 of P of t is 0. Okay. Which of the following statements is always true? Option A, P has a root in the interval, closed interval 0 to 1. Option B, all roots of P lie in the interval 0 to 1, closed interval 0 to 1. Option C, P has no roots in the closed interval 0 to 1. And option D, P has exactly one root in the closed interval 0 to 1. Now to solve this problem, I am going to assume that our polynomial P is a non-zero non-constant polynomial. Okay. Now I assumed it to be non-zero because otherwise we will get the trivial solution which will be inconclusive as far as the options are concerned. So this is the integral that is given to us, or integral equation I should say. Integral 0 to 1 P of t dt is 0. Okay. Now when is a definite integral equal to 0? Okay. We know that definite integral can be interpreted as area, right? Area under a curve. And if you have the graph of the function above the x-axis, then that area by integration is obtained to be positive. And if that area is, or the curve is below the x-axis, then the area obtained is negative. Okay. So if the function is non-constant and non-zero, and if its integral is 0, then I must say that some part of the function lies above the x-axis and some part of the function lies below the x-axis. Okay, so by the intermediate value theorem, because the function is continuous, it must intersect the x-axis once, or I should say at least once, isn't it? If you try to sketch the curve, let's say this is 0 and this is 1, then for the integral to be 0, it must be either like this. Okay, so that this positive area will be numerically equal to this negative area. Okay, so this is an example where the curve intersects the x-axis only once. But you can also have this function. Let me now draw another curve. Well, it's looking like sin x, but it's not sin x because remember we are studying polynomials. Okay, so even this particular curve satisfies the integral equation. Okay, positive area, negative area, correct. So here how many roots do we have? 3 roots: 0, 1 by 2 and 1, and here we have only one root, that is 1 upon 2. Okay, which means by the intermediate value theorem, the graph should intersect the x-axis at least once, or the function f of x or p of t has at least one root in the interval. Now clearly C is not right. Okay, because otherwise the integral can never be equal to 0. So now we need to pick the correct option out of A, B and D. Okay, now these figures are telling us, the figure on the right hand side, that the polynomial need not have exactly one root in the interval. In this case it has 3 roots: 0, 1 upon 2 and 1. Okay, so D is also ruled out. And you can say intuitively that all roots of P need not necessarily lie in the interval 0 to 1. So A is the right option, but we need to provide solid arguments supporting the statement that we are making. Okay, so A is indeed the right option, but we need to give reasons as to why we discarded options B and D. Okay, now these are only figures. These are not the exact polynomials, or we have not specified the equations of these polynomials. Okay, so let's do that. Now to answer the question why B and D are incorrect, I have considered this function f of x. Okay, or I should have said p of x, but anyways. Now if I consider this function which has three fixed roots, x equal to 0, x equal to 1 and x equal to 1 upon 2. Okay, and using the rules of inequalities, you can say that when x lies between 0 and 1 upon 2, the function, if the function is positive, then when x lies between 1 upon 2 and 1, the function is negative. Okay, so in these two intervals, the function always has opposite signs. Okay, but to discard b and d, I have added two more factors to this so that it becomes a fifth degree polynomial. And those two factors are x minus alpha and x minus beta. And alpha and beta should not be taken to be random numbers. Okay, there is a relation between alpha and beta, and that relation is, if you pick alpha as 1 upon 2 plus gamma, where gamma is any real number, then you should take alpha as 1 upon 2 minus gamma, so that this particular property of the function is preserved. Okay, we'll now see graphically what happens if you take different values of alpha and beta. Okay, so this is the function x minus 1 upon 2 x minus 1 that I'm talking about. Okay, and let's keep the x values between 0 and 1. Okay, now you can see that the area of the curve above x-axis is equal to area of the curve, or area under the curve below the x-axis, because we have now taken this particular point which divides the interval into two sub-intervals of same length. Yeah, okay, now I have hidden the grid so it will be better to visualize. Now what we should now look for is, can our polynomial have all its roots in the interval? For example, if I were to exclude this, then for this cubic polynomial our function has only 3 roots and all of them belong to the interval 0 to 1. Okay, 0, 1 upon 2 and 1. But if we consider this particular polynomial, okay, now I've added this scaling factor. If you don't add it, then the curve looks flatter, but that's fine. That is not going to change the roots, location of the roots. Okay, now currently the value of a, okay, or in the solution I've called it gamma. The value of a is 0.9, and here you can see that this function has 5 roots and 2 of them lie outside the interval 0 to 1. The first one is 1.4 and the other one is minus 0.4. Okay, and if I reduce a, okay, currently a is 0.3. Now you can see that all its roots lie inside the interval 0 to 1. Okay, so it is not necessary for the function to have all its roots inside the interval 0 to 1. You can have a function with integral 0 to 1 0. For example, here 0 to 0.5 is below the x-axis and 0.5 to 1 is above the x-axis. So the area is negative here and positive there, so addition is 0. Okay, which means if you pick one value of a, then d is discarded. That is exactly one root in the interval. Well, even with the polynomial x into x minus 1 into x minus 2, d is discarded, because then you have 3 roots, 0, 1 and 1 upon 2. And to discard b, all its roots lie in the interval 0 to 1. We considered yet another value of a. What was it? That value of a was 0.8. The 5 roots were minus 0.3, 0, 0.5, 1, 1.3. So the roots 1.3 and minus 0.3 lie outside the interval. So It's not necessary that all the roots of the polynomial should be inside the interval 0 to 1. Okay, so we have solved this problem. We have successfully eliminated options B, C and D. So it must be option A.